Hey guys, welcome back. So, we're in a new school year and we're still doing bio. Yay. Okay, so today we're going to talk about carbon cycling and about topic 4.3 in the ecology unit. So, first off, let's start with talking about the carbon cycle. What is the carbon cycle? Okay, so here you are, you're eating a little apple. Oh, you're eating an apple, right? And then you decide to eat half of it. So now you only have half an apple left. And you're going to discard of it in a little pot of soil. And here's your apple. So what happens now? The worm that's in the soil is going to come and digest this apple and make use of the vitamins and the ingredients that are in the apple. Next, whatever this is, whether it be a detritivore or a saprotroph, it's gonna do some cellular respiration and the CO2 is gonna go back into the atmosphere. And now the atmosphere is gonna have CO2. And then another tree, this plant over here, is gonna take this CO2 and is gonna make use of it for photosynthesis. And then it's gonna be eaten by a cat, a green cat, and it's gonna come eat this. So basically, you get the idea of what's happening. The carbon dioxide started over here. Oh no, the carbon dioxide started over here in this apple. Then it got moved and it got deposited in this soil. And then the detritivore or the saprotroph made use of this apple and the CO2 went back up here. So we're seeing the transferring of CO2 of carbon actually from this apple to the soil to the atmosphere back to the plant. So this is what we call a carbon cycle. It's the kind of cyclic motion of nutrients in life. So what if we want to draw our own little carbon cycle? We don't have to include every single thing, but it's good to know an idea. So let's say we start with the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We're going to start with the carbon dioxide here. Who's going to make use of this carbon dioxide? Exactly, the plants. So once this plant uptakes the carbon, it will, through photosynthesis, we can label that photosynthesis. This plant will become the sink of the carbon dioxide. So we call this process a flow of movement, and we call when the organism actually has the carbon dioxide, we call it a sink. So that's what's going on here. So this plant takes the carbon dioxide and now it has carbon. It is a sink of carbon. The plant also performs a process called cellular respiration. So we can label this one cellular respiration, where the carbon in the plant is going to go back and return to the atmosphere in the form of CO2, carbon dioxide. And then let's go back to this plant and say that it is going to be eaten. Oh, yeah. The carbon dioxide is moving from the plant to the sheep. This is my great sheep. Okay, so the CO2 is moving, the carbon actually. Sorry, if I say CO2, I really mean carbon. The carbon is going to move to the plant through consumption. Right? Because the sheep is eating the plant and the plant has carbon. So now the sheep has carbon from the plant. Okay, and now the sheep is also going to do cellular respiration, and the carbon dioxide shall return back to the environment where it belongs. And then this sheep is going to die. Oh, yeah, okay, and it's going to, okay, here the sheep is excretion. So the excretions of the sheep are going to return back to the soil down here. This is its little excretion. Okay, it's going to return back to the soil, and this also contains carbon. So in the process of excretion, the carbon that's in the sheep is going to return back to the soil, where who's going to make use of it? Like we said, this little worm in the soil is going to make use of the little excretion and is going to be able to decompose it and return that carbon back to the soil. So this saprotroph or detritivore, or whatever is feasting on these feces, pun unintended, is also going to do cellular respiration. So cellular respiration. And is also going to decompose. So that's going to go here. Okay. And then this arrow is leading to the sheep's death. Okay. This is going to be a skeleton. Okay. Now the sheep's going to die. So that is going to result in a carcass, which can also, this can also be decomposed. You can say decomposed. Oops. Decomposed. And the carbon, we're always talking in terms of carbon here. The carbon is returning from this back to the environment. Here it's their excretions returning to the environment. But yeah, so here the sheep is dead. And eventually, over time, what's going to happen is that it's going to get compressed down into the ground. So let's put an arrow leading from here back into the ground. It's not supposed to be this messy, but this is just for explanation purposes. So it's going to go back into the ground and it's going to get pressed down so much that it's going to get to down here. This is our little skull. Oh, this is our little skull. And eventually, it's going to turn into a fossil fuel. Draw a little oil. Eventually, after a long period of time, it's going to fossilize and turn into a fossil fuel, whether that be oil, coal, oil or coal, or other types of fossilization. So we call this process fossilization. And yeah, so humans make use of these fossil fuels, and eventually they're going to set them on fire. They're going to burn them in order to combust them. And combustion is the reaction where it releases carbon dioxide. So, okay. From the fossil fuels, we're going to go back to the atmosphere in the process of combustion. Combustion of fossil fuels. Oh, we didn't label this. This is decomposing, I guess. Oh, we already have an arrow there. Oh, we double labeled. Okay, yeah, there we go. So this is our finished little carbon cycle. As you can see, we're not going to go over this again. There's lots of different arrows that all involve the flows of carbon in the atmosphere, showing how important it is that there is carbon because it plays such a major role in the continuation of the atmosphere. So now we can check off the carbon cycle. We already did that. Okay, moving on to methanogens. What are methanogens? So as you know, well, as you can see, the word methanogens, you can see here, methane. So basically, what methanogens do is that they convert whatever they can kind of get their hands on into methane. So where can you find methanogens? You can find them in the guts of bacteria. You can find them in waterlogged areas. You can find them in other different conditions. And they're going to be converting some compounds into methane. Why are methanogens important? Because as we remember from this little diagram, this sheep died, and if we follow the arrow of the skull, this one over here, we follow the arrow, eventually the sheep will turn into a fossil, well, into this carcass. And who decomposes it? Well, the decomposers. Decomposers need specific conditions to thrive. Decomposers, they thrive in conditions that are aerobic, meaning they have oxygen. So that means when they're in conditions that are anaerobic, we like this, good. When they're in anaerobic conditions, such as acidic conditions, or in waterlogged conditions, they don't thrive as much. Methanogens, they don't thrive in these areas, but they can survive here. They can survive. But doesn't mean they can function, but they can survive. So over here we have the decomposers, and they thrive in they don't thrive in acidic or waterlogged conditions. This is why we have a phenomenon called partial decomposition. And it means exactly what it says. It's a partially decomposed carcass. So let's say we go back to this sheep again. It's going to be partially decomposed. So only this part is being decomposed. The rest is still organic. So what decomposers do is they convert the organic to inorganic. So when we have partial decomposition, half of it is organic and half of it is inorganic, because the decomposers weren't able to finish their job because of the conditions they were put in. So what's going to happen now is that this organic material that was not broken down by the decomposers, eventually, let's go down to this page, eventually is going to turn into peat. Now, peat is partially decomposed organic material that has been compressed over a long period of time to turn into this substance, this brown solid substance that is buried deep under the earth. And eventually, over time, peat will turn into what we know as coal or other fossil fuels. And yeah, so that is the importance of methanogens. Okay, we can take her off, and colon fossilization. And if you remember over here, we use these fossilizations. We mentioned here that they turn into fossilization and they become oil. Well, not necessarily oil, but fossil fuels. And eventually these fossil fuels can be combusted to release CO2 back into the environment. So because of carbon cycling, although the inorganically digested material is going to be turned into fossil fuels or peat, the carbon still can be returned to the environment, and that's why carbon cycling is so important for the environment. Okay, now moving on to, now moving on to ocean acidification. So, most of you don't take chemistry, but in chemistry, you'll learn that there's some compounds that can be dissolved and that can't be dissolved. Usually polar dissolves polar and non-polar dissolves non-polar. In this instance, water is able to dissolve carbon dioxide. And when you add those two together, so if you have a sea of water over here, and you have some carbon dioxide in the air, it can easily float down and dissolve in here. So we have CO2, H2O. We have a combination of them in the water. Because the plants in the water, like algae and coral reefs, they also need to do photosynthesis. So they take the carbon dioxide that was dissolved by the water, and they're able to photosynthesize with it. So what's going to happen over here is the water and the carbon dioxide are going to bind to each other, to form a compound known as CO3, hydrogen carbonate. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. So hydrogen carbonate, let me just make sure that it's actually called hydrogen carbonate. Anyways, so this compound is able to kind of diffuse, not diffuse, but it can separate, and it will eventually turn into H2CO3, can turn into H plus ions plus hydrogen plus carbonic acid. So this is carbonic acid, and this is hydrogen carbonate. Yes, this is correct. So this carbonic acid that happened because the hydrogen ion left this hydrogen carbonate. The carbonic acid, let's label that carbonic acid, is very, very bad for the sea. because there are, let's see how good I can draw this. Okay, that's a pretty good shell. We have shells and we have snails. Let's pretend that's a snail. Okay, and so what's going to happen here is that the carbonic acid is going to go and infiltrate this shell. So this shell is made out of calcium carbonate. This is what the shell is made out of. And the carbonic acid can dissolve the calcium carbonate and eventually thin this out completely so that we're only left with an exposed snail. Imagine a snail with no home. Imagine evicting the snail because of the carbonic acid in the water. And eventually, this is really bad for the population of mollusks, snails, slugs, crabs, all these animals and organisms that rely on having shells to protect them from predators, from harsh conditions, just their homes. So yeah, this snail was evicted because of the carbonic acid in the water. Let's see. Okay. All right. That is basically all we have for today. I hope this video was helpful. If you do have any questions, please let me know. Bye, guys.